Hello? 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 Oh, now it's working. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to one of the last deep dive workshops at ACEF 2025. Yes, it's the last day. It's a good turnout for one of the last sessions. And I see maybe some of you already thinking about your way to the airport or maybe for lunch if you have a more short-term focus. But before we power down completely, pun intended, we've saved the biggest challenge and question for last. And the question is, how do we actually operate a power system that's flexible, distributed, affordable, and reliable? Just a very small question. And to boost your engagement, if you have your WOVA app, we've prompted you to participate in the poll. And the first poll question we've asked is slightly provocative, but please do take part. And so far, it's split between the optimists and the pessimists. The first question is, can countries operate a reliable power system without fossil fuel baseload? It's a personal and controversial question, but so far it's equally split between the pessimists and the realists, and possibly the optimists, so 3 optimists in the room. So do participate in the poll. But while you are trying to figure out how to do that, to frame these questions and to kick us off, I'm delighted to introduce Rhiannon Harris, the UK Deputy Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific. Rhiannon, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Ivana, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to add my welcome to you to this deep dive workshop, A Flexible and Distributed Power System. And I want to start by extending my gratitude to the ADB and the Southeast Asia Energy Transition Partnership for co-hosting this event with the UK government today. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the Asia Clean Energy Forum, a testament to 2 decades of collaboration, innovation, and shared commitment to a sustainable energy future. The UK is honoured to be part of this journey, contributing to the dialogue and action that ACEF fosters across the region. The UK's own clean power journey has shown that rapid transformation is possible. I actually personally had the privilege of playing a small role in this when I helped take through the legislation that became the Energy Act 2013, setting up the UK's electricity market reform, including contracts for difference. And in just over a decade since then, we've shifted from a system dominated by coal, accounting for 40% of generation in 2012, to one where the UK's final coal power station closed last year, and renewables now supply over 40% of our electricity needs. And we want to go further. Under our mission, Clean Power 2030, we plan to triple offshore wind capacity, double solar and onshore wind, and increase our storage capacity 6-fold. This includes large-scale battery storage, digitalised demand response, interconnectors with neighbouring markets, and innovative grid management solutions led by our system operator. As we integrate higher shares of renewable energy into our grids, the need for adaptability, resilience, and interconnectivity becomes paramount, whilst also opening new revenue streams and opportunities for efficiency. The UK's own energy transition offers valuable insights. Over the past decade of our increasing renewable energy capacity, We've managed grid stability and energy security. In doing so, we've gained substantial experience and know-how, while also seeing the emergence of innovative businesses and approaches that are shaping the future of clean energy. Initiatives like the Ayrton Fund and platforms such as GridWorks exemplify our commitment to supporting clean energy infrastructure and innovation, both domestically and internationally. In this session, we will build to understand the following questions. First, is a flexible grid possible? We'll hear about the technologies and system innovations from batteries and offshore wind to distributed energy that can help turn ambition into reality. Second, is it affordable? Our speakers will examine the role of public-private partnerships, falling technology costs, and smart regulation in bringing solutions to scale. And thirdly, is it both secure and reliable? With growing risks from climate and demand fluctuations, we'll discuss how interconnectors, planning, and system operations can help ensure resilience. So we hope to have a few more of the optimists in the room by the end of this session. I encourage everyone to engage actively. Please share your perspectives and consider how we can collectively overcome the challenges ahead. It's through knowledge and experience sharing that we can pave the way for a more sustainable and resilient energy future together. Thank you in advance for your participation. I look forward to hearing the discussions and collaborations that emerge from today's workshop. Thank you.
Thanks, Rhiannon. I'm just looking at the word cloud. What is the one word you think when you hear flexible power? That's in the poll. Smart, interconnected, adaptive, but also unreliable. Maybe to shed some light on, is a flexible power system possible? I'd like to invite Andrew Lever from the Carbon Trust, who will talk a little bit more about how we can deliver a flexible power system in the UK, some of the lessons learned, and what will it take for a power system built around baseload to one embracing the variability of new generation. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Ivana. Yeah, and very good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be here and give, some hopefully interesting perspectives and insights into this question around how can we build a truly flexible power system. I guess if there's three things to take away from the next 10 minutes or so, are these. One is that flexibility is not an optional question or decision to make. In fact, it's a kind of inherent reality of future power systems. It's fundamental, in a sense, to balance supply and demand, integrate renewables, and of course, ensure system stability. The second point, I guess I'd like to just talk through is it does deliver economic benefits. You know, a flexible system is one that reduces investment in grid infrastructure and in generation, and minimizes system costs. And the third point is around, well, actually, we all are different and different countries will have different starting points, different characteristics. But that is, of course, the common themes come through around how do you coordinate data becomes more important for everyone, and governance indeed they're all common requirements in how we manage this. So maybe just an opportunity to start defining what flexibility actually is, because it's a term that we use quite freely and often. In a very simple sense, it's around modifying generation or consumption to some response to an external signal. And that could be a price signal, cost signal, it could be a technical safety issue. It's the ability of the system to react to that. And there's some core principles around how you take forward, how you design then a system to enable flexibility to be a part of that. Of course, it has to be resilient. It has to be adaptable and ensure that supply and demand is balanced all times. It has to have the consumer at its heart. That's from a cost perspective and a security of supply perspective. And we have to accept that dynamic operations are just a reality of the future. The amount of assets on the system becomes much more complex, and therefore the operation to control those becomes much more dynamic. And the enablers, therefore, to do that are around digitalization, understanding what's going on where, Of course, we need assets and flexible assets to play their role within the system. And innovation regulation, of course, comes together to adapt and follow and signal to providers to provide that flexibility in a timely manner. On the right-hand side here, you see, we're moving from a low flexibility system today, dominated by large centralized power units. Distribution transmission is very much a one-way flow. And of course, we're moving into a higher flexibility future, where many more providers will be at a smaller scale, be much more decentralized, and a bi-directional flow, of course, and engagement with users and what we would call prosumers to adapt demand. Coming back to the value and economic opportunity, we did some analysis a few years ago in the UK in a net zero future and estimated that we could save between 10 and 17 billion pounds every single year in 2050 by adopting flexibility. Now, those savings come through building less infrastructure and building less generation, because effectively we're using the system much more efficiently. The range of savings here are driven by the fact that the UK has, perhaps more unique in the Northern Hemisphere, a requirement to decarbonise heat. And how you do that, I think, varies depending upon the solutions that we have, from electric heating through to hydrogen. But the number is a big one, if we can get this right. As Rhiannon had introduced, the UK has already been on a journey over the last decade or so to decarbonise. We've moved from a fossil-based 60% of generation produced in 2013 came from coal and gas, to a 60% in 2023 produced by low-carbon power, renewables and nuclear. Of course, flexibility has increased over that time, with battery storage coming onto the system, a doubling of interconnection capacity, as well as a decrease in power consumption as well. Going forward, of course, in the Clean Power 2030 plan, very much changes that. And you'll notice here that the reliance on gas goes from around 40% down to less than 5% in 2030. The gas has been a reliable and flexible asset. Let's not be sugarcoating it. Has provided a very good, reliable service in the past. But that doesn't get us to our decarbonisation goals. And so therefore we have a system in 2030 that is dominated by wind and solar. We heard a tripling of offshore wind, a doubling of onshore wind, a tripling of solar PV capacity. And only a minimal reliance upon gas for those very short term and short periods where it's relied upon. Now, of course, what does that mean for flexibility? Well, it means we'll need an awful lot more. And the chart here shows just how much more we need in the next 6 years. You'll see, of course, that batteries make up the largest proportion of flexibility. We have a slight increase in interconnection and a relatively large increase in demand-side flexibility. Now, that's something that is a step change, I think, in terms of how consumers, and what we mean by demand-side flexibility is both on the domestic side and industrial side, the shifting of demand, the control of demand to provide that service. And the reason that's important as well, it's actually a very cost-effective way of providing flexibility and stability into the system. It's electric vehicles, it's home appliances, it's industrial load. And if we can harness that, then that provides a very, very secure and flexible and low-cost way of providing flexibility. So that is the challenge in front of us and the opportunity in front of us. I guess I just wanted to share some of the lessons so far to date learned, but also things that will be required going forward as well. I moved these into kind of 3 parts around markets, policy and technology. The UK, of course, has had an open and competitive market for many, many years now. And it allows the, innovation around adaptations to those markets. And picking out just one of here, the NESO Pathfinders kind of initiative, which effectively kind of opens up more of the market to those smaller consumers and storage providers. And that's not something that has traditionally happened in the past. With policy and regulation, we need almost flexible policy for flexibility, and to adapt that and to be reactive to things and proactive. For example, our connection reforms, where we are, taking a closer look at prioritising build-out of generation and minimising grid queues. Our Clean Power 2030 plan states that there is capacity there waiting to be connected into the system to meet those 2030 targets, but we need to be clever and look through that grid queue to prioritise those and make sure they're coming on in a timely manner. Of course, technology is absolutely critical to this, and there's been a lot of investment, a lot of innovation, both on the tariff side, on digitalisation of the grid and control of the grid, on smart meter rollout, and that continues, and of course investment in offshore wind and interconnectors, and that has been quite critical to understand, to learn, to make mistakes, and to learn from those mistakes to use the right technologies in the right way to get to that 2030 target. I'd just like to finish with, I guess a message around how we should be starting to think about this transition and with flexibility at heart. Now, I've got three blocks here which I think are relatively self-explanatory, but we are all moving away from our fossil fuel past. We are all investing in renewable energy, and that of course requires changes to the grid. All of these things are interconnected. You can't do one and you can't make a decision in one without it having an impact on the next. I think approaching our system transition as an interconnected system and accepting that it is interconnected is a good way to think about how to do this efficiently and effectively, and indeed cost effectively. We have an initiative, Greenprint, which is looking at on a country basis these types of questions and these types of approaches to ensure that we can get through a country's transition in a cost-effective and decarbonised way. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. So clean power by 2030, we have 5 years. So wish us luck. And in 2030, hopefully we'll be at ASEF sharing those learnings. But in the meantime, then from the UK, we pivot to Southeast Asia. And I'd like to invite Simone Verland, program manager at the IEA, who will talk us through what a flexible system could look like in this vibrant region of Southeast Asia. Welcome, Simone.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you, FCDO, for inviting us in this really interesting conversation. So yeah, as Ivana said, we'll focus on Southeast Asia and look a little bit how the energy system in the region is going to evolve. And we start by our starting point, where we are today. So first of all, Southeast Asia has made significant progress in expanding renewable energies. This has been driven by climate commitment, by supportive policy framework, and of course the falling cost of clean tech technologies. Between 2000 and 2023, the share of RE has tripled with a significant share of solar and wind. But modern bioenergy, geothermal, and hydro still account for 96% of the region renewable energy supply. And of course, despite the growth of renewable, most of the region electricity demand continues to be met by fossil fuels, in particular gas and coal. In 2024, coal consumption in Southeast Asia rose by almost 8%, driven largely by Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Now, if we look ahead, first of all, by 2035, electricity demand will reach 2,000 terawatt-hour, up by more than 50% from today. As things stand today, there will be an uptick in a range of renewable energy resources led by Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, alongside Laos PDR. However, under the stated energy policy scenario, RE cannot cover all the demand growth, so there will also be a rise in fossil fuel. In the announced pledge scenario, you have a much more rapid transformation, which is led by solar and wind. Other RE technologies such as hydro and geothermal also accounts for a larger share of generation. One thing is clear, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, to integrate this higher share of wind and solar, we will need more flexibility, and Southeast Asia has a lot of that. VR integration is a global challenge. I think it was very clear from the UK example. It's not unique to Southeast Asia, and to try supporting decision makers in this, the IEA has developed the phases of VRE integration framework. This framework classifies the power system into 6 phases of VRE integration, which describe the typical challenges resulting from the high share and the impact of solar PV and wind at the system level, along with typical solutions to address those challenges. It goes from phase 1, where VRE has no significant impact at the system level, to phase 6, which no system has reached so far, where the system security supply relies almost exclusively on VRE. Phase 1 to 3 are considered low phases, and 4 to 6 high phases. Categorizing system challenging uses this framework is helpful for policymakers to identify the priority measures at each phases and ensure their timely implementation. So how does that reflect in Southeast Asia? ASEAN countries are at varying stages of readiness to manage the transformation of the power system and facilitate high level of VRE integration. All of ASEAN countries, except for Vietnam, are still in phase 1 today, which means that there is no significant impact at the system level, and most of the VRE integration impact can be addressed through relatively straightforward modification of existing assets or relatively simple operational improvement. By 2030, Thailand, Cambodia, and the Philippines will move to phase 2, where VRE starts having a minor to moderate impact at the system level. Today, only Vietnam is in phase 3, and we expect that it still be in phase 3 in 2030. Phase 3 means that VRE start to determine the operation patterns of the system and increase the uncertainty and the variability of the net load. In Vietnam, there is a specific constraint, which is the need to enhance the transmission capacity to address the congestion, in particular along the south-north corridor. So this slide is basically the answer to the question, which of the technologies below can provide power system flexibility in the pole, and it's all of them. With the growing share of VRE, flexibility needs are set to increase significantly in the region over the coming decade, in particular driven by the growth of solar. In the next 10 years, the focus should be on addressing short-term flexibility needs, namely hourly change in the net load. In the longer term, seasonal flexibility, which reflects the variability of the next load throughout the year, will become equally important and should be anticipated. Today, flexibility needs around the region are met mostly by flexibility in thermal power and hydropower. Here, you have the example of Indonesia, where coal and gas currently provide around 80% of the short-term flexibility, and the remainder is supplied by hydropower. However, by 2035, battery storage and demand response, in particular from ACs, are expected to become an important additional resources to short-term flexibility. Beyond 2035, short-term flexibility comes from a whole range of resources, including batteries, demand response, electrolyzer for hydrogen production, and of course, still traditional sources. To support the demand growth and facilitate the integration of renewables, it is of course essential to build a robust, modern, smart electric grid and infrastructure, including cross-border interconnection. And we have talked plenty about the APG during the week. Significant growth in both transmission and distribution grid is expected in Southeast Asia. By 2035, under the announced pledge scenario, the transmission network length will need to double compared to 2023, and the distribution network will need to grow by 60%. Looking further to 2050, network lengths will need to almost triple. This will call, obviously, for a significant increase in investment on grid, from around $10 billion per year today to $29 billion in 2035 and $43 billion in 2050. I'll let you absorb those numbers. And finally, I want to leave you with a few key recommendations that we share with our policymakers and partners in the region. First, assess your system preparedness for VR integration by improving your understanding of the resources which are available to you, identifying infrastructure needs and gaps in funding, data, and skills. Two, ensure secure grid operation with clear requirement for VRE, like forecasting, visibility, and controllability, and how it reacts to disturbances. Three, unlock flexibility from your existing power system to manage increasing variability. Here, there are levers like optimizing dispatch, activating demand response, and making existing generation more flexible. Four, design incentives to garner flexibility and system services from a wider range of sources. This requires defining and quantifying the need for the services and creating the way to procure them. Five, accelerate technology integration and innovation. Regulatory, market, and strategic support is needed to rapidly scale up existing ones and develop technology that will be key for long-term decarbonization. And six, which I think is very important, it's a personal favorite, adopt a holistic approach. So cross-sectoral dynamics needs to be integrated into the power system planning, and resilience needs to be considered in addition to security and efficiency. Global expertise should be shared, not just technically, but also at policy, regulatory, and market as well. Finally, I just want to leave you on a bit of self-promotion, which is about the creation of the Singapore office next to our good friend from FCDO in Singapore, through which we are hoping to engage with all of you on all those different questions in the next few years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Wow, there's a lot of tripling, doubling, six-fold increase and tens of billions. But thank you also, Simon, for giving us a framework and a phased approach to starting to think about those challenges. So now from the regional to the national, I'd like to invite Mr. Luis Dan Figuracion from the Department of Energy here in the Philippines to tell us a little bit about the Philippines' journey towards flexibility, especially emphasizing the role of energy storage systems. Welcome, Mr. Dan.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Philippines. I think this is the last leg of this forum. So I'm here to discuss what is the prevailing and governing policy of the energy storage systems in the Philippines. And this is the policy that is currently supporting the to have a flexible grid. And some part of the presentation will also discuss about the interconnection. Okay, I will briefly discuss about the Department of Energy, overview of the power sector, what are the enablers for the energy storage systems to come into the Philippines, policies supporting the energy storage systems, and the Philippine Energy Plan. So this is the mandate of the DOE: prepare, integrate, coordinate, supervise, and control all plans and programs and activities of the government relative to energy exploration, development, utilization, distribution, and conservation. So among all those uh, sectors or part of the energy industry, you can find a room for energy storage. So I will forego on the mission and vision. Offices of the DOE is four, one in Pangasinan. The main office is in BGC, one in Cebu for the Visayas Island, and in Davao City for the Mindanao Field Office. So this is the breakthrough of the Philippine electric power industry. That's EPIRA, Electric Power Industry Reform Act of 2001. Prior EPIRA, the Philippines energy electric power industry, actually, the generation and the transmission sector are purely managed and operated by the government. After the enactment of the Republic Act number 9136, the generation sector was purely privatized. So that's where investors can come in. The transmission sector was assigned to the newly created body, the National Transmission Corporation, but later on 2009, they entered into a concession agreement with the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines to become the transmission network provider and system operator. Okay, so that's just an overview of the power sector. At a glance, the Philippine energy sector. We have one transmission concessionaire, 142 distribution utilities, and 5 other ENER zones, 153 retail electricity suppliers, 487 participants in the spot market, 251 generation companies, and 616 generation facilities. That's as of March of this year. Let's go to the policy supporting the energy storage system. In 2020, the Department of Energy introduced the Smart Grid Policy. This is a roadmap that guide the distribution sector to implement and adopt how to have a smarter distribution system. This policy recognizes ESS at the time as a vital component of the smart grid system. The second bullet is the current policy of the energy storage in the Philippines. This distinct the energy storage from the generation sector. Because before the issuance of this policy, energy storage mainly is being considered as part of the generation sector. Next is the policy on pump storage hydro. This allows the legacy plant, we call it legacy plant, that's the old pump storage hydro in the Philippines, to be included in the green energy auction program that is being conducted by the Philippines. So these are the salient features of the ESS policy. By definition, I will no longer divulge on that. I know everyone here is knowledgeable. But on the uses of the ESS as governed and prescribed in the policy, it allows standalone energy storage systems, regardless if it's battery, flywheel, compressed air, pump storage, to become or to be able to enter into the ancillary service, provided that they are certified by the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines as ancillary service provider. Energy storage system can also enter into a bilateral agreement with the distribution utility or through trading in the spot market. So the next two bullet actually is the one that prescribe the integration of ESS in the variable renewable energy. First is to manage their variability, and fourth is to manage auxiliary loads of generation companies, meaning this is actually basically the time shifting operation of renewable energies. The next two bullets, is deferment for the transmission and distribution facility upgrade and as well as power quality. So that's where flexibility, that's where the energy storage system can come in to support flexibility of the national transmission. And on the side of the end users or the load, energy storage can also use as part of the demand side management. So ESS in energy transition, by allowing an increased integration of energy storage to the grid with BREs, the policies the policy envisioned to allow more penetration of VRE while ensuring reliable supply. As the industry continues to evolve, the DOE is looking in the possibility to supplement or amend the current policy to allow grid forming inverters. So we're looking into that and currently at the research and development stage to revise that policy to include grid forming inverters to all inverter-based resources, as well as to include them in the ongoing revision of the Philippine Grid Code. Well, this is the salient features of the ESS policy. It prescribes standalone energy storage, hybrid setup, and the integrated setup. The policy also laid out a clear process of permitting and licensing for energy storage systems. Actually, it can be lodged through the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, where it's an online platform where the proponent is lodging or submitting their requests, and the government will act into it in a certain number of days. So these are the identified ESS in the Philippines, but it does not limit it to battery, compressed air, flywheel, and pump storage. Well, this is the requirements. It's in the policy. As of March of 2025, battery energy storage system comprised 57% of those are in Luzon, 23% is in Mindanao, and 20% is in Visayas. However, the 634 megawatt installed capacity and 599 megawatts of dependable capacity is just 2% of the overall grid, of the overall generation mix of the Philippine grid. So these are some of the existing ESS projects in the Philippines. On the Philippine Energy Plan, okay, I will just mention of it. The Philippines is actually also addressing the transmission constraints. We have created the ad hoc committee to facilitate the integration of variable renewable energy, and as well as to address the curtailment that is being conducted right now with the help of integration of energy storage systems. So for the reference scenario, the Philippine Energy Plan said that it envisioned to have a 35% RE share in the power generation mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040. In CES 1, the clean energy scenario, and clean energy scenario 2, the only difference here is that we have a high offshore wind on CES 2, low in CES 1. So the Philippine government is very thankful to UNOPS ATP for this technical assistance that support the targets. We have already conducted or concluded the Philippine Grid Diagnostic and Roadmap for Smart Grid Development. Actually, this is instrumental in the current green energy auction program for integrated renewable and energy storage system. This has been the reference to prepare the terms of preference. What we have right now is the these are the other two is ongoing, accelerating clean energy scenarios, which is the consultants are conducting technical sessions for the staffs and employees of the Department of Energy to achieve the CES both in the generation and transmission planning. And the third is the pump storage hydro to determine where are the feasible sites and location in the Philippines for pump storage hydro. So these are the 5 energy transition strategies. I would have to update this. Actually, we have already included the decarbonization of the energy of the electric vehicle industry by using EVs. So it's already 6, not just 5. So accelerate OSW, smart and green transmission system, port infrastructure, and voluntary early decommissioning, of course, the energy efficiency and conservation. So this is the future energy scenario. Philippines envision to have a 10% energy savings on oil products and electricity by 2040 up to 2050. The RE, already discussed earlier. Emerging technologies, 50% of EV penetration rate in road transport by 2040. And ICT adopt advanced and smart grid technologies. Energy resiliency, resilient and climate-proof energy infrastructure. Actually, it's a that's what the government is envision, a self-healing grid. Thank you for your listening, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Luis Dan. It looks like the Philippines is definitely investing in both policy and technology innovations. So now let's bring this to life and move on to the panel discussion section of this deep dive workshop. So the panel discussion will be moderated by Mr. Richard Birch from the UK Department of Business and Trade. And this panel features those at the forefront of de-risking and deploying some of the technologies we've already heard about today. So therefore, I'd like to invite to the stage Ms. Jovi Gill, the CEO of Ultilium Green Energy. Welcome to the stage, Ms. Jovi. So Ms. Alma Rojas Aguila, Country Director and Head of Philippines at Courier Generation. And Mr. Michael Connolly from the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, flying all the way from London. Welcome. And welcome, Richard, and the stage is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. So in terms of sort of when we're thinking about sort of a flexible energy system, the commercial context is absolutely vital, whether we're thinking about, sort of initial innovation, scaling up, moving down the cost curve, or the sort of full-scale rollout of technologies. And we've got a fantastic panel that can cover that full range of issues. Alma, I'd like to start with you first, if that's possible. Thinking about offshore wind, which is a technology that's moved a long way in the last decade from sort of single-digit gigawatts to, I think we're on 80 plus gigawatts globally now, so very much in the large-scale rollout phase. What would you see as do you think the role for offshore wind could be in the Philippines currently?
Okay, so to start with, I'm sure you already have heard several times that the government targets 35% of RE mix by 2030 and 50% by 2040. That means that in terms of capacity, I believe that offshore wind will have the greatest contribution to that energy mix or renewable energy because of its scale. So that translates to about 6 gigawatts of new wind installations by 2030 and 16 gigawatts of new wind installations by 2050. So I would say that it's going to be the scale that will be the main contributing factor of offshore wind to achieve this RE target.
And so thinking about the context to make that a reality, that opportunity, what do you think are the key policies and initiatives here in the Philippines that you would like to see to sort of really realize that potential?
So actually, it has already been passed, and this is particularly the allowing of 100% foreign direct investments to the Philippines, particularly in the renewable energy sector. You may know that prior to 2022, there was a nationality restriction in terms of RE development. Foreign companies can only invest up to 40%. And last November to December 2022, they now fully allow up to 100% of foreign investment to RE, and that means that foreign developers and those with technical capability in terms of offshore wind track record and experience, knowledge, as well as funding capability. The big guys, the big players in the industry would be able to come into the Philippines to do RE and particularly offshore wind investment and development. Because as you know, the Philippines currently doesn't have offshore wind yet. And that means that the existing or current RE developers and local companies, local energy companies, doesn't have or don't have the technical know-how in building offshore wind and may have, I would say, limited funding capability. So I believe that this one is a critical step or policy that would enable the offshore wind or the RE target be realized.
Thank you. Michael, taking a step back from that large-scale rollout and thinking about the sort of the innovation phase that's also as important, what actions do you think can be taken to create an enabling environment where innovation can really succeed?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I'm from the UK Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, and we deliver a number of programs under the ETN Fund, which focus on supporting clean energy innovations in ODA eligible countries, working with partners such as the ADB and other NDPs as well. So I think from learnings from those programs, creating an enabling environment is really critical for supporting innovation in technologies. Some of the technologies that we've been supporting about, especially in the earlier phase for offshore wind development, but also in particular battery energy storage systems and other smart technologies. I think I'd like to pull out probably three areas where I think it's really important for the creation of the enabling environment to help that innovation flourish and help the scaling and of these new solutions. So I think the first one would be support for a stable policy and regulatory environment, and that could be done through technical assistance. I think we've heard some discussions on the kind of support that technical assistance can provide in helping develop a stable regulatory environment, so that then innovators can then know the frameworks that they're working in terms of their development of technology, and kind of know what kind of the solutions that we need to be working towards are. I think a second one would be also capacity building and training, so providing a capacity building support for innovators, helping them understand new technologies and build partnerships, I think crucially between technology innovators and also the adopters as well of the technology, so that there's really the forward thinking there in terms of the solutions being taken up and on a wider scale to help accelerate the transition. And then I think finally, really crucially to help as part of the overall environment is making the right kinds of finance available for investments, especially at that early stage of R&D and also demonstration, supporting pilot projects and deployment of technologies so that the learnings can be shared, disseminated, and help inspire uptake. But crucially, that the right kinds of financial mechanisms are needed to support that.
And perhaps if I could just ask a question just to build on that last point that you made, what role can climate finance specifically play in sort of addressing those key barriers for innovators?
Yeah, I think that's really key question. So I think there's a number of different barriers that obviously the innovators face, especially at early stage with R&D. I think that climate finance can really play a key role in addressing and supporting developers and adopters of the technologies, in particular in hard to abate sectors and for nascent technologies such as we've been talking about today. So I think support for early R&D through grant support is really critical. So support for the earlier stages of research and development, but then also in building on that grant support, and I've mentioned it briefly in the previous answer, the support for piloting and demonstration as well, so that capital kind of support through grant financing for innovation technologies to be deployed in a particular solution, in a particular context, that then can really showcase that the solutions are there and are viable, and then that can then be built on and hopefully push toward the solutions towards to wider uptake.
Brilliant, thank you. Jovi, Michael mentioned BES in there, and I mean, obviously, you know, batteries are going to be vital in terms of delivering the flexibility as we move to a network that's dominated by intermittent renewables. So, you know, what steps do you think need to take place for BES to really deliver on its full potential, particularly sort of in a market such as the Philippines?
Thanks for that question. Actually, the two things I'd like to address that question with, and the first one is really looking at BES as a standalone technology that should be purchased separately from solar or its renewable energy counterpart. A lot of what's happening, or what's been traditionally happened in procurement in countries like the Philippines, is that BES has been an afterthought and has always been coupled with renewable energy. So at this point in time, where BES is actually a very critical part of how renewable energy will be more adopted, the technology is so much better and the pricing has gone down. It's due time that they start looking at BES as its separate procurement channel. We can see that from a company perspective, but we can also see that from a government perspective. I'm really happy that DOE is here. A lot of what is in place right now, for example, for GF4, is IRES. IRES is good, but I think we take that step further, and in the future, we should have specific auction for grid-only projects, because as what's been stated earlier, BES is a technology that will allow stability within the grid itself. So it doesn't actually need any other renewable energy counterpart to be able to stabilize the grid. So that in and itself could be a project in and of itself, which is what they do in Australia and what they are looking to doing in places like Cambodia, for example. The second thing that I'd like to mention is that I think from an industry perspective, that the knowledge of BES and batteries need to be elevated as a whole. Right now, batteries, because it's been an afterthought, people know more about, the professionals know more about renewable energy, solar, wind, et cetera, but the knowledge for BES and batteries are actually not quite there. We need to look at BES as a smart technology, because it is. The fact of the matter is that there are technology out there that allows, for example, life cycle of the battery. I know that the typical market is at 6 to 8 years. There are, like ours, go up to 25. Batteries that are 100% recyclable and non-toxic that will allow island nations to recycle 100% of that battery every 20 to 25 years versus having to figure out where do you put your batteries every 6 to 8 years when you have to replace it. In addition to that, the fact that technology out there allowing you to customize your BES and ensuring that for solar energy, for example, the fact that an AC coupled BES being matched with a DC solar PV means you would have to buy a power converter. But when you have a DC coupled BES with DC, obviously a DC native PV, you would have to take that, you can take that additional cost out, and you don't also have additional maintenance. There's also the fact that you can have systems that are that could allow you to future-proof your projects, because BESS and batteries actually are going to continue to get better in the next few years, ensuring that your system is battery agnostic is critical. Because when you have a BESS system that only allows you to replace it with LFP or with very specific company's battery, your ability to be able to change that and upgrade to a better technology battery is limited. You would have to literally replace the whole system. We have that technology. Last but not least, AI is here. AI should allow your battery system to control and let you understand what's happening with the state of your battery cell. I'm not talking about your battery stack, I'm talking about each cell. Therefore, you know, the state of health, the state of charge, the temperature. I have to say, I was a little bit surprised that one of the executive here in the Philippines said that thermal runaway heat should be normal. It's actually normal because that's the norm for what is existing right now. But that is not normal because you can't control that. Find the system that allows you to do that, because there is a system controller. Our system controller controls down to each cell, which means you should know exactly the state of that temperature before it even goes out and up and becomes dangerous. Hopefully that helps.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll close the panel now, but very much appreciate your thoughts.
Thank you to the panel for this really insightful discussion, which brought some of the issues we've been discussing to life. The big question is, have they convinced you that it's possible to operate a reliable power system without fossil fuel baseload? The poll question says yes. Half of you are optimists. It is possible, but only with big investments. 5 of you, not realistic. So let's try and convince the 5 of you in this room for the rest of the session. And that means let's talk about money, because obviously the most innovative solutions need to be matched by innovative financing. And that's why I'd like to invite Myo Zin from the British International Investment to give us some examples of where BII have financed some of these new assets and technologies. Welcome, Myo.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm from the British International Investment, and we are 100% owned by the UK government. We manage around 8.5 billion of the UK taxpayer money, and focusing on investments in the emerging markets, both in Asia and Africa. Ivana told me that I should just focus on 3 slides, so which I will do. So in Southeast Asia, we are investing in only in the climate finance. We've been given the allocation of 500 million pounds to be deployed over the next few years. But we have a large investments in both, in India and Africa, which I would like to touch upon. So I think one investment that we did in Africa is called the GridWorks, which is a $300 million grid platform, 100% owned by the BII, and we used to be called CDC as well. It was set up since 2018, and the idea is really to electrify, large areas of Africa. And as you know, over the 2/3 of population in Africa do not have access to electricity, and therefore, I think one of the solution is to help build the transmission system and expand the infrastructure. So this GridWorks is focusing on development, construction, of the infrastructures through PPP, concessions, contracts, et cetera. And the Great Works is also invest in IPP as well, and in addition to sort of the off-grid sort of infrastructure as well. What we are seeing is that, I mean, by investing in the grid infrastructure, the power could be supplied to the population center reliably, and the business model, the commercial business model, can also be proven. So we are actually putting in quite a lot of development expenses to showcase that this model really works, and the private sector participation really works in the grid investments. Some of the, I would say, a couple of investments that projects that we are trying to do is, one is in Uganda. There is a project called Amari, which is a $90 million investment project, and which consists of upgrading the substations and at the key points of the Uganda's grid. And these substations will be able to help improve the supply of the electricity to the industrial users. And this is actually one of the major projects of the National Development Plan of Uganda. Currently, there's no private investments in the transmission sector in Uganda at the moment. So our GridWorks team is really helping helping the government to come up with a framework, to come up with sort of how to structure the investments, what kind of agreements should be in place. So it's been a few years that we've been working together with the government. It's not a done deal yet, but the government has agreed to be able to support. So I think those conversations are flowing. And then the other one is we are working together with the Mozambique government in order to deploy capital and build 460 kilometers of the transmission lines. These will connect the power to both central and the northern regions, and this is also going to be one of the major projects of the government as well. The other one that I would like to highlight is, very recently last year we invested in Energrid, which is a $300 million transmission platform in India. The India electricity sector is still dominated by coal, and therefore, the government, in order to decarbonize, the government needs to reframe their grid infrastructure to, from the traditional energy hub, where the coal plants are, into the other areas which have the renewable energy. The government in India have a very ambitious goal of 500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. To support that, 30 billion of investments will be needed for the grid infrastructure. So our investments, together with the Norfund and Intergrid, which is a public listed infrastructure trust, sort of with the investors of GIC and KKR. So we invested about 300 million in order to build the greenfield transmission lines and the battery energy storage. So the beauty of this is that currently Intergrid, which is already in the public market, they are not able to take a lot of the greenfield risks. With our investments from BII and Norfund, Intergrid can really bid for much larger projects. And once the projects are COD, Intergrid has plans to take over these projects. So by doing so, we are in a way mobilizing the additional capital. So with our capital of $300 million, we estimate that we will mobilize 1.2 billion in investments in the grid infrastructure. Yeah. Lastly, I think at the bottom, you can really see that before the COD stage and the bidding stage on the left, and in the left picture, all the three investors that invested in the Energrid, and the Energrid will be invested in the project SPV. And then once the assets are sold, Energrid will own the project SPVs, and then we will exit. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mir, for this run through of some of the role of climate finance in de-risking grid infrastructure, some really innovative models, financing platforms to reach scalability, as well as dedicated climate finance vehicles like GridWorks. So the final speaker for today, and the other asset that we haven't focused on, so we've covered batteries, we've covered grid and transmission infrastructure, we haven't covered the role of interconnectors. So this is a rising asset in the flexibility toolkit, and that's why I'd like to invite Mr. Rob Rome from National Grid Ventures to share how these cross-border links are helping the UK balance supply and demand in real time. A round of applause for Rob.
Thanks, Ivana. Who loves interconnectors? Show of hands, please. Who was in my presentation on Wednesday? Oh, not many, actually. One, two, oh, not many. Oh, some over here, yeah, some. Okay. I love interconnectors, and I'm going to tell you why. So I'm Rob Rome, come from National Grid, interconnectors business, Director of Commercial, Customer and Regulation. Previously, I ran the control center for the electricity system operator. But before I tell you a little story about that, let's just have a look at our portfolio of interconnection. 8 gigawatts of interconnection with our surrounding neighboring countries. A lot of parallels here, I think, for your ASEAN power grid. When I look at the ambition of the ASEAN power grid, I think to myself, you must do it. You have to do it. There's so much value on the table by doing it. So the interconnectors there, if you can see, IFA was the first one. Can you see connecting on the bottom corner there, connecting the UK and France? That was the most obvious one to do. Only 70 kilometers between the two countries there, UK and France, 1986. The next one, BritNed, 2011, with our partners Tenet in the Netherlands. The next one to be delivered after that was Nemo Link. So IFA 2 gigawatt, BritNed 1 gigawatt, Nemo 1 gigawatt, 2019. Next one to be delivered was on the left there, IFA 2, 1 gigawatt connection again with France, January 2021. The next one to be delivered was North Sea Link, the one in the top, 1.4 gigawatts, 740 kilometers long, a big one. The longest subsea interconnector in the world, 1.4 gigawatts, that was November 21. Viking Link, the longest onshore and subsea interconnector in the world, 1.4 gigawatts, and that went live. That's the baby of the portfolio in December 2023. Now, why I love interconnectors, if you remember the COVID period, that terrible period that we had, the summer of 2020, we had social distancing, we had lockdowns. The plant operators in the UK, and I'm sure right across the world, you know, they couldn't take their summer outages, they couldn't do their maintenance. And when we came to the winter of 2020 and 21, and I was leading the UK's National Control Centre, the plant started failing. They ran out of hours. It was a terrible situation. The standout portfolio was the interconnector portfolio. It did what it said it was going to do. It brought clean power from our neighbouring countries into the UK when we needed it for our 2-hour demand peak in winter, and when we didn't need the power, we helped support European demand by exporting. Hugely flexible portfolio. And then we fast forward to the winter of 2022-23. You remember the illegal invasion by Russia into Ukraine, pushed the gas price up, scarcity of gas price. But when you get scarcity, when you get high prices, it's always more than one thing. And so the double whammy here was that the French had problems with their nuclear fleet. And what happened was we supported, in the first half of that winter, UK supported France and other neighboring countries with interconnector exports. But then as the French, sorted out their nuclear fleet in the back end of that winter, again, we took imports from those interconnectors. So being flexible in sharing power reserves depending on the needs. And here you can see the flows. So look at the top bar there. So with France and with the UK, very much a sort of 50-50. We provided France with power in the first half of the winter, and they provided us with power in the second half of the winter. 5 terawatt hours sharing between. And you can see we imported a lot from Norway. Of course, Norway's plant mix is mainly hydro. Net imports are from Netherlands and Belgium as well, and with Ireland, a bit 50-50. Now, if you go on to LinkedIn, who's connected to me on LinkedIn? Show of hands, please. Oh, you are you? Oh, nice, thanks. Yeah, please do connect on LinkedIn, because I'm very keen that when interconnectors provide, value, that I talk about it and I show examples, just like I am in this presentation. A lot of people on social media, they say, "Oh, you can't trust them. Boo, interconnectors, can't trust them. They won't flow when we need it." Well, just look at this chart here. Now, this is a complicated chart, so I'll try and bring it to life. So all the dots are basically imports or exports across our interconnectors versus what's called derated margin. So that's the surplus, so it's, if you can imagine, generation, available generation minus demand and reserve requirements equals the surplus. So if you have a tight system, not much generation above demand and reserve requirements, then your margin is going to be quite low. So if you look in that bottom left-hand rectangle there, that's when the derated margin was between 0 and 1,000 megawatts in GB. And how many periods since 2019 have interconnectors been exporting when we had a derated margin below 1,000 megawatts? 2 30-minute half hours since 2019. So when the GB has had scarcity issues, interconnectors have imported and not exported during those periods. So my view would be you can trust them. Here's a day. I think this is winter, winter 24-25. This is across the GB French border, and this shows the flexibility, on an hourly basis within day. So if you look at the two lines there, the blue one is the GB price, and the red one is the French price. So when the blue line's above the red line, you should have flows, the interconnector capacity holders should buy low and sell high. So if you buy low on the red line, sell high the blue line, that would sponsor flows going from France to GB. But if you see on that, it's actually the morning run-up. Look at the red line above the blue line there, and what happens? GB provides power flows to France because the interconnector holders are buying low and selling high because it makes economic sense. And there's the flexibility of interconnectors within day. And then across the winter that's just been gone, it's quite tight actually. It's fairly low renewable output last winter, fairly high demand, and there were 3 what we call capacity market notice days. That's when capacity, you've got a bit of a capacity crunch. And on the 8th of January, that one on the right-hand side was an electricity margin notice, which was submitted and published by the electricity system operator. And that's a call to generation to try and make more available. So on the left-hand side there, so 14th of October, that was the first tight day of last winter, and interconnectors were exporting to our European neighbors. However, when we needed it for our 2-hour peak demand period in the UK, we got up to 5 gigawatts of interconnectors going from export to import, and again supported UK's demand and reserve requirements. On the 3rd of December, interconnectors were already importing, but you can see the significant imports that day that again helped to keep the lights on in the UK. But the most interesting one, that one on the right-hand side, our Energonet colleagues in Denmark had issues on they're investing heavily in their grids, especially in the West Coast circuits, and they had restricted the Viking link from 1400 megawatts to 700 megawatts. There was a electricity margin notice, a call by ESO to make more capacity available. So a quick phone call to Energonet, what can you do? Energonet said, well, we'll export less to Germany. We'll export 700 megawatts less to Germany because their market price is 90 euros. The price was approaching 5,000 in GB. So Energonet sent 700 megawatts less to Germany. That enabled them to send 700 megawatts more to GB and kept the lights on. And just last week, there's the bank holiday weekend, there's GB in full export to our neighboring countries. We had high wind, we had high solar. I know it's difficult to believe in the UK. But we had negative prices in our market, and there were more positive prices in our neighboring countries. Buy low, sell high, that's what our capacity holders did and exported to our neighboring countries. But we're not stopping at this portfolio, 8 gigawatts of point-to-point interconnectors. We have great ambitions to be more efficient by creating an offshore grid. We have ambitions of 300 gigawatts of offshore wind in the North Sea, and to make the connections more efficient, rather than bring radial connections to every shore with offshore wind, we plan to create an offshore grid. And offshore hybrid assets, or multi-purpose interconnectors, as they're sometimes called as well, are the first of a kind enabling technology to create this offshore grid. And we're starting with Line Link. It's a 1.8 gigawatt connection between the UK and the Netherlands, with wind connecting in the middle. And that's planned to go live in 2032. And you've got to start, one piece of advice for me with the ASEAN Power Grid is, just like we did with IFA, start with the most obvious one, deliver it, get confidence in delivering it, and show that it delivers great benefits, which it has. So in summary then, interconnectors are hugely flexible. I've just shown you some examples of how they do it. Don't listen to those scaremongers on social media. Say, oh, you can't trust them. They don't enhance security of supply. They do, and I will continue to post on LinkedIn when they do. And they complement renewable energy. The fact of having another route to market, having another route for wind to take wind and other renewables and other power to neighboring countries means you don't have to constrain it when the GB generation fleet is operating more than our demand needs. And offshore hybrid assets are the new technology which will help us deliver even more value towards the Clean Energy Plan 2030 and towards net zero to 2050. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Rob. Hopefully, Rob has convinced you of the merits of interconnectors in a flexible and reliable power system. Unfortunately for you, Rob, batteries are still at the top of the list of technologies in our poll, but interconnectors are very close second, followed by smart appliances. But anyway, you still have some time to participate in the poll, but also now it's your turn to ask maybe 2 or 3 questions given our proximity to lunch. So I'd like to invite Mr. Robert Mark Scholkhammer from the ADB, who will take us through the brief Q&A session. Over to you, Robert.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Ivana. And I think what I heard the last hour or so was actually rather optimistic. Ivana, you started off by saying, are we optimists or pessimists? I think so far we heard, first of all, I think from the UK, it's doable. You can take a major economy and you can actually close down all coal. It's possible. But don't forget, the UK has resources which most developing countries can only dream of. So, but then moving to Southeast Asia, moving to the Philippines, I think a lot of innovation, a lot of technology, interconnectors included. So there's a lot there's a lot available in the toolkit. The last, also, I think from our colleague from BII, there's capital available, there's money. A lot can be brought to bear to make all of this ambitious move happen. But how do you make that trade-off between all that nice technology and know-how that's available and the actual cost? Of course, this is of a lot of interest to ADB. So for the Q&A, we have eight minutes. And I'm going to look at, while I look at the app, I wonder if there's any questions anybody would like to field directly from the audience. And then for everybody who spoke, if you don't mind, I'll just come to you directly once we have the question. Well, we have 3 online questions. One of them, in the US, flexibility of demand has proven cheaper than peak supply. Oh, thank you very much. Oh, that's great. Better, bigger, don't need glasses. So in the US, flexibility of demand proved cheaper than peak supply from any technology. What is the Asian utility experience? There's also a related question. Flexibility is an evolving concept being assessed in different geographies. We need a scientific definition of flexibility. I think the Asian utility experience, I wonder if we could go to our colleague from the Philippines. Would you mind giving a response from your perspective, from Department of Energy of the Philippines? And the question here is, in the US, flexibility of demand has proven far cheaper than peak supply from any technology. Could I call on you from our host country? And what would you say? I think, could we get a mic?
Thank you. To answer the question, in US, flexibility of demand has proven far cheaper than peak supply from any technology. What is the Asian utility? Well, in the Philippines, we have, it's also included in my presentation earlier, we have a policy on smart distribution utility roadmap. The key challenge on that is any upgrades on the distribution utility capex projects will be passed on to the customers. So in 147 distribution utilities in the Philippines, 120 of those are cooperatives, meaning the customers are also owners. So before they invest in such upgrades to enable flexible supply, they need to seek the approval of the majority of their customers. So most of the customers didn't want additional costs, so that's the main challenge, financial. How we are going to implement the flexibility of supply if we don't have the capex to support it, the infrastructure. So that's the main challenge in the Philippines.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, I think this really comes down to the main theme of the discussion today. Again, there's a lot of stuff available, but it costs money. I think one very interesting correlation in the Philippines is, and I think, thank you very much for the presentation earlier. I mean, DOE is obviously doing a lot. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on. ADB is happy to be part of that. Philippines is also the fastest growing economy in Asia. I think Philippines and India share that current honor, how should I say it? And because the argument very often used is, the more you spend, and I think it's very sensitive in Europe at the moment, why spend all this money on decarbonization? Will we make ourselves, uncompetitive? But I think the Philippines and all that work, I think with BII, you talked about the work in India, really shows that I think you can, pursue this innovation and still grow fast. Also, I think the case in China too. So we have a question on India. Now, actually, maybe we can go to the third one. Flexibility, an evolving concept being assessed in different geography. We need scientific definition of flexibility. Panel's view on the same. I wonder if I could cast this to our speakers. Would anybody like to take this one? What is there a fits all type of formula we can apply, or maybe could yeah, Andrew, please.
Yeah, hi there. It's a great question, actually. And it's one that even we struggle with in the UK, I would say as well, because it is still a relatively new concept in many similar countries. And that goes to, even related back to the previous question around consumer-related flexibility and taking that step towards even trying to, with communicating to users about this wonderful thing of flexibility and how they can provide value into the system by being, changing their demand is a step. Is something that requires a kind of, again, a level of understanding and a simplicity in that communication as well. I think moving back from that and into a more maybe technical view, yes, I think there is different types of flexible needs on the system, from seasonal aspects right down to frequency and inertia response, and being very technical, and flexibility arguably covers all of those aspects. And I think the other thing that we could really do with sharing and learning from each other is, how do you, from a system operation perspective, really embrace that and understand the levers that you need to pull with regards to how you develop that. So it's complicated, I think, and I think we have to accept that sometimes, in that we are moving into a different type of system, which is much more flexible. So I do think that there are opportunities to, because electricity is electricity, yeah? It doesn't matter where you are in the world, it operates very, very similarly. And therefore, there's opportunities, I think, to share that knowledge and learning and best practice. But yeah, and I think, therefore, yeah, I think I would support the view that there's probably a lot to do and an opportunity and value in having a knowledge and an understanding of what flexibility is all about.
So I think just to take that, I think, adapt to the different geographical context, but there's a core set of principles which apply whether you're in Mongolia, Philippines, or the islands and islands. I think that's quite key. And I'm very, very conscious of time. I think as it's 29 past, and the most evil thing that anybody can do is to extend into lunch. So I think maybe, Ivana, should we call it a day on the Q&A? But thank you very much. I think it's been a very enlightening discussion. I learned a lot, and I think it's an optimistic discussion too.
Thanks, Robert. We don't want to be mean, and we don't want to keep you from lunch. So maybe I'll just want to invite Mr. Robert Cotton from our partner at the Energy Transition Partnership to provide a summary and some closing remarks. But also, if you're feeling very, very hungry, please feel free to proceed to lunch. And thank you for your time. And do speak to the speakers after the event, because I know there are a couple of questions we haven't answered. Thank you.
Good afternoon. You were invited to make an exodus for lunch. You haven't. I was given 5 minutes, but I promise I won't take that. It's lunchtime. So firstly, thank you to the FCDO and UK government for putting on this event. I had envisioned what I would say at this point, and it was just an archetypal talk about how good everybody was. So I'm going to speak from my heart, because it was really easy, because that was really good. I think for me, this has probably been the highlight session of ASF, at least for me. I work a lot in grid flexibility. It was nice to see a real technical deep dive, taking the UK case study, looking at it regionally, internationally, and cutting it across all the key areas and challenges of flexibility. So congratulations to all of the speakers. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for sharing. It really, genuinely, sincerely was an incredibly interesting session. I'm John Cotton. I'm from the Energy Transition Partnership. We don't have time to go into what we do, but in short, we bring together the governments of the UK, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, and philanthropies came together around 2018. They had a vision for an expedition of the energy transition in Southeast Asia. They created a fund. We manage this fund, and we do this by working with the governments of Vietnam, Indonesia, and Philippines. We work by dialoguing with the policymakers, trying to understand the bottlenecks and bringing in international expertise to support them. One of our strategic outcome areas is smart grids. When we started this 5-6 years ago, smart grids seemed like something quite far away. The designers of our program clearly knew how smart grids would grow. Post COP26, when we had strong commitments across the region, net zero 2050 commitments from Vietnam and Indonesia, no new coal commitments from the Philippines, as well as the ambitious targets we saw, smart grids was clearly going to be a key barrier in this space. Our early work involved developing smart grid roadmaps for Vietnam and Indonesia. We designed a detailed design for the control centres in Indonesia, the SCADA and EMS, and we continue our work in grids across the region. A question that came up there at the end, I just wanted to touch on, what is the scientific definition? What we've learned from our working smart grids, or what I think I've learned from our working smart grids, is there isn't such a thing as a smart grid. There isn't a scientific definition per se of what is flexibility you can label. I understand smart grids and flexibility to be solutions to problems. And each country, each grid, each region, each sub-region or mini-grid has different problems and solutions. What we're trying to do today, and I think as an international community we have a responsibility, is to bring all of these thoughts, solutions together. We've learned today, and I know from my own past experience, how the UK has created a policy, regulatory, legal and financial environment to drive innovation in smart grids. There's been some fascinating funds created to really bring solutions to problems that only exist today or even going to exist in a few years' time. The UK, I see, have driven that innovative vision and allowed entrepreneurs to come with solutions. And I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from neighbouring countries, from the international community, but a lot of the solutions sit within the country. They're not yet invented. And I think one of the takeaways from today is to create that space for finance to flow into smart grid solutions and into the innovation required to solve the flexibility issues. We learned today from Ivana, you set the scene very well, can we have a flexible smart grid that is affordable, secure and reliable? Rihanna went forward and basically said, well, the UK certainly thinks so. We've taken all coal off the grid in the UK and have very ambitious tripling offshore wind targets. Solar, offshore wind, and doubling RE targets. Andrew consolidated this and talked about how the UK has looked at this, how the solutions exist, and how clean power by 2030 is a possibility, but we need to define flex, expand, explain why it's needed, and open it up. Simon brought us to reality a little bit. He showed how we are in ASEAN, how we have a tripling of renewables recently. It's increasing, but fossil fuels are very much the baseload, and to move away from that, there's a lot of work and flexibility needed. Our panel discussion looked at offshore wind in the Philippines, open invitation. We're investment ready, as Alma said. We're open for business, want offshore wind. The policy and regulation on capacity building R&D needs to come in place, as Michael said. And Jovi gave a very interesting presentation on BESS, talking about the technical deep dives and financial considerations needed. With all of that, Mio came to the table and said, we have money, here's some of the money, and I think the global capital is looking, well, I know it's looking, I work in coal phase down. Global capital is not looking at investing in coal, and that's a big challenge, especially when we come on to coal flex, different story, but global capital is looking for clean energy investments, and flexibility is one of the biggest drivers and opportunities for global capital. And with that, we learned that Rob loves interconnectors, and I think we all should love interconnectors after Rob told us to. He also offered us to interconnect with him on LinkedIn, and I think that's one of my key takeaways today. I have made some very quick takeaway points. So one is on collaboration. Please reach out to Rob on LinkedIn. help him deal with the trolls, and whoever's coming after Rob saying his interconnectors don't work. But across the green energy space, we need to interconnect. We need to connect, and partly this is to enable the finance. And going to Simon's favorite point, Simon had recommendations. His favorite recommendation was to work holistically across all of the areas. This is something we see at ETP. It's absolutely critical, linking the finance policy, regulatory, legal, environmental, social, bringing it all together to allow these capitals to flow. We have tools such as PPPs, public-private partnerships, as well as one I learned this week, PPPP, public-private philanthropy partnerships, are just some of the solutions, but we need to work holistically. Another takeaway is there's various technological readiness across the regions. So each country will be exploring what technology is ready to apply to flexibility. And then final was supposed to be the interconnectivity joke and bring in Rob's LinkedIn, but I did that one already because I'm talking very quick. So with that, I'd just like to thank once again the FCDO for putting this together. It's been a spectacular event. It's lunchtime. I'll shut up and hope you all have a great time. Bye-bye.